So news came out on the Man City APT case yesterday. Reports around that suggested Man City may have had some kind of win in their case against the Premier League after a vote on an amendment to the system was dropped from a Premier League meeting. What are your thoughts on that?
Look, the problem with the whole of that APT situation is that we don't actually know anything. We don't know everything. All of the analysis has been based on one press article. So we have no information as to what City was seeking and therefore what the potential outcomes may be. Now, we do know that it took place 3 months ago. So my estimate of when the decision was going to come out was going to be 1 to 3 months. So I think it's just come out. So that's fine. So that's it within what we would expect. We know it was a 2-week hearing. So this wasn't a case of City asking for something very simple. City will have been making quite a big case. I mean, a 2-week hearing for a matter of this nature means that there was quite a lot of submission made by the barristers in that hearing. So you, I think, can assume that City wanted quite a lot. And by quite a lot, I suspect they wanted a fairly wholesale removal of the associated party transaction regime. It seems, from what we've heard, that the decision is in. It is not public. It is not even public within the Premier League, i.e. it's not been shared with the clubs. It may never be shared with the clubs. It may never be shared publicly. In fact, it probably won't be shared publicly. But I think if the decision is in, City at best have only got a very small concession because the rules on the Premier League website have not changed. So if you were to go on there this morning, the rule book is still the rule book from July of this year. Now that might change in the next 24, 48 hours. But in the absence of quite a wholesale change to that section of the rules, I would suggest that the likelihood is if City, if the result is in to the Premier League, and that is what the press are reporting, then that means that City have substantially lost, but may have got 1 or 2 concessions in respect to various bits and pieces. And that might be in respect to the data bank, which is this system whereby all the clubs have to submit their transactions over £100,000, commercial transactions, such that when new transactions are put forward under the associated party regime, the league has a basis on which to analyse them for fair market value. So look, it's a very imperfect system because we have very little information, and we probably will never have that information because the rules as they're written mean that in terms of arbitrations, and this was an arbitration, not a disciplinary, the public do not find out even the decision. So not only do they not see the hearing itself, but they don't even find out why the panel decided what the panel decided or what the parties were arguing. So that may change in the future, but that's the position as we are now.
Then the Telegraph reported this week that Premier League clubs are concerned that the bills for the Premier League after the Man City 115 charges case could reduce their share of funding at all. Do you think that's likely?
Well, yeah, well, it's not a could. It definitely will. I mean, at the end of the day, the Premier League doesn't have any independent source of finance. It comes, there is a central pot of money which is then distributed to the clubs. So the Premier League is spending the individual club's money in defending these cases or prosecuting these cases. And so there's no real way around that. And therefore, if it's spent, let's say, 45 to 50 million pounds in the last year, which is what the reports say, then that is the top slice of the club's money. So each club will have to take a deduction of their proceeds for this year from the Premier League to effectively cover those increased expenses. In the way that you would do in any kind of service charge in a flat. Everybody has to chip in their own bit, and that's just the way it works. And if you have a year where you've got some exceptional costs, some very big legal fees, then everybody has to chip in a bit extra. That's just the way it works. I mean, look, at the end of the day, it's only even 50 million across the 20 clubs is not that significant. It's not that much money. So it's not that big a deal, I think, from a financial perspective. It's not ideal, but it's not going to change materially the system. And the Premier League has no choice. I mean, what's the Premier League meant to do? It has to regulate its the clubs, and that costs money ultimately. You know, lawyers are expensive.
I guess the clubs that haven't been involved in any of these legal cases could be a bit frustrated, though, that they are being punished for things that don't actively involve them. I guess it does involve them because it's the Premier League, but it's not through anything.
Yeah, but a lot of those clubs are the clubs that are particularly keen for the Premier League to pursue breaches as aggressively as possible, first of all. And secondly, the way that the cost regime should work in English law is that the loser pays. So in scenarios where clubs are found to have breached, the Premier League will have hoped that they would recover the vast majority of the costs from the clubs. Now, the issue that they've had is that when that's come down to some testing within the structures that are there in the Premier League, as we saw with the Everton cost case,